Okay, so the purpose of this video is to discuss what is a moral hazard, how do moral hazards relate to our existing healthcare crisis in the United States, and what can be done about it. As it relates to this context, a moral hazard is something that occurs when someone has fewer incentives to behave responsibly because another party is bearing the consequences of their irresponsible decisions. So let me give you a quick example. I was recently on a business trip with a good friend of mine. We got there late at night to the city that we were staying in, stayed the night. Next morning, we walk out to the hotel parking lot. He's driving, and we get over to his car. And the first thing I notice is not only is he able to open the car door without unlocking it, meaning that it had been unlocked all night, he got into the car and the keys were already in the ignition. And I got on the passenger side kind of incredulous. I was like, dude, did you just leave your car unlocked with the keys in the ignition in this new city we've never been to before? He's like, yeah. I was like, what? Why would you do that? Are you crazy? He's like, well, my insurance policy will cover me if my car is ever stolen. And I got this car for such a good deal that if it gets stolen, I'll get more money back in the insurance payout than I paid for the car. So I actually am kind of hoping that it gets stolen eventually. And I was just like, what? But that's a perfect example of a moral hazard, because not only did he have few incentives to behave responsibly, he actually had incentives that were pushing him towards the irresponsible behavior. So if we pivot industries, how does this occur in healthcare? Well, we recently went out and did some street interviews with just a few local people here in the community, and we noticed this theme of moral hazards coming up a few different times. Here are two quick clips.
Have you ever shopped around to find the cheapest price before receiving care?
Oh yeah, I mean, I haven't gotten insurance, so I just found like a homeopathic doctor who just takes the money. But I mean, I just do go look for like a cheaper price just because insurance is so ridiculously expensive.
Have you ever shopped around to find the cheapest price before receiving care?
I personally haven't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have health insurance?
Yes.
Awesome. And is that through your employer or do you shop it on your own?
It's through my parents' employer.
Got it.
Now, I find that so interesting, but not surprising. Can you see how the more insulated someone is against the cost of their care, the less likely they are to exercise even just basic responsible decision making in the pursuit of that care? When you have someone who doesn't have insurance and has to pay everything out of pocket, and then you have someone who not only has insurance but doesn't even pay for their insurance, whether because, like in this case, getting it through your parents, or if you're getting it through your work or anything like that, so you're doubly insulated, who do you think is going to make more phone calls to try to find the lower price before a procedure? Now, checking around to try to find the lowest price before a procedure is a pretty basic thing, but that's what makes this so wild. I'm sure people in both camps check both Uber and Lyft before booking a ride, or they check both Delta and American before booking a flight. But when it comes to healthcare decisions, it's like none of those common sense rules apply anymore. And a large part of that is because of these moral hazards that limit the incentives people have to consume healthcare responsibly. And to be fair, other industries would be exactly the same. Ride sharing and airlines would have the exact same problems if similar moral hazards existed in those industries. In fact, I've even been in that situation myself where when I book a flight and I'm paying for it, I'll go through and check out all of these different sites to try to find the lowest deal. Recently, I was booking a flight for a company trip and they were going to be paying for it. And I booked a direct flight so I wouldn't have a layover because, well, it was coming out of someone else's pocket. And so I was like, hey, if they're paying for it, might as well skip the layover. But if I was paying for it, I would have taken the layover in order to save some money. That same exact thing happens in healthcare every single day, where because people make these decisions without thinking about the dollar amounts behind them, they make decisions that they wouldn't make otherwise. So what does this all boil down to? Well, the more directly responsible people can be upfront for the cost of their care, the more conscientious they'll be as they consume that care. Even something as simple as just calling around to a few different providers before scheduling a procedure to try to find the cheapest price would do wonders to control costs across the country. And the key is the upfront part of that equation. Because the truth of the matter is, we're all still ultimately responsible for all of the consequences of our decisions. Even if we're temporarily insulated against the financial consequences of our care, as in the current system, eventually those consequences always catch up with us. Insurance premiums always go up, or our jobs can't pay us as much if they're the ones covering our care, or taxes will increase if the government is subsidizing our care. You see, costs don't just disappear into a vacuum when they're not paid by you. They always circle back around eventually. And the more upfront moral hazards there are, the bigger those costs are when they eventually do come calling. In recent years, the percentage of GDP in the United States going towards healthcare has increased from 12% to 17.3%. And it seems evident that a large part of that can be attributed to programs such as the Affordable Care Act, which insulates people against the financial consequences of their decisions on a number of levels. Now, at CommonCare, we're all for people getting the care that they need. However, we don't think that insulating people against the financial consequences of their care upfront is actually that good for anybody in the long term. Incentives need to be aligned with reality. Otherwise, people will behave in fantastical ways, believing that the consequences will never catch up with them. But as we all know, and as we're all experiencing to some degree right now, they always inevitably do.